I appreciate, so grateful for you. Like I said, it's been since February since I saw you last. And if you asked Marie right now, quick, Dave, who are some of your favorite people? You would be one of the people she would mention as my favorite people.
And you're mine.
I know. We don't see each other enough, though.
Mutual Admiration Society.
I don't know. Well, we met in, I guess, it'd be 2008.
Yes.
And I don't know. I think we connected right away. I think you and I are similar cloth, whatever the metaphor is.
Yeah.
I think something.
Yes. Well, yeah. And I hadn't met your dad before either. And then my dad and your dad.
Forever, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we bonded over some
probably
similar
pipeline kid stories. Yeah. Yes.
And what our experience was versus what new people to the pipeline, what they were experiencing for the first time.
Yes, I have some funny stories rattling through my head, which probably I won't share today, but yeah, it's a different lens.
Yeah.
Growing up in, for sure.
Yeah. Green versus, been around for a minute.
Know you, I love you. Not everyone does. Like I said, go tell me who you are, Sherry, for anyone who's ever met you.
Well, I am, I guess, formerly known as Sherry Stoppler, which might ring some bells depending on who's listening. My name is Sherry Trentini now, but my dad was Lauren Stoppler, who was the Midwest Pipelines for many years. Even wearing.
I love that you wore the ring.
I did, yeah, wearing the ring. So yes, I started pipelining when I was 12, and before child labor laws.
Yes.
I started working in the office in Penn, Saskatchewan, doing payroll for a week because his office guru was going away on holiday. I did a terrible job and paid people sub that weren't supposed to get sub, didn't pay other people sub that were supposed to get. I was popular that first week. And lots of, funny stories about my inability to make coffee. And then Russell Blanchard worked for my dad. He's from Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. And over the radio one day, because of course I've got the bass in the office, and they were doing a little job, I think, at Kalium, calls into the office and says, "Sherry, I'm dragging up." And I'm like, okay. Didn't know what that was. So I used the call system to call my dad, and everybody's listening. "Dad, what does dragging up mean?" Russell wants to do that. And just so much laughter from all the guys, because I was like, well, I thought I was just talking to my dad, not to the whole pipeline. So I guess that's one way to break in.
I would say your story has to be one of the more unique, because I always tell people I grew up in pipeline to meet my brothers and sister, but I said, I think you're like OG. Legitimate. Grew up in pipeline.
But I was also, I worked in the warehouse that was a couple jobs, tons of fun there, and tons of hard work and fun. I was a welder's helper.
Right on.
I wanted to be a welder because that was what my dad did, but I was deterred from doing that. That was there were some women, very few, back in the late 80s that were working on the pipeline other than in administrative or,
for sure,
support roles. But there were some girlfriends or wives that were sitting in the truck doing whatever. And so I did. I was a welder's helper once. And then I moved into payroll, but doing it properly.
Nice.
So I think at one time, just it's amazing how in that environment, especially doing payroll, everybody, because you would go cash checks and I'd go to the bank and cash everybody's check, and had police escorts sometimes coming back with all the cash.
Oh, yeah. My dad's told me those stories too.
Yeah.
And heaven forbid the checks didn't arrive on the Thursday. Then you have to give cash on the Friday. You have to go, there was a lot of more shenanigans and stories back in those days. So sometimes they'd have to send somebody down to sit in the bank, so there wasn't no nonsense with the guys as they were cashing their check. But yeah, those days, unfortunately, e-transfer, man.
Yeah, right? How far we have come. Yeah, but that was just what you did because we didn't have cards, or it wasn't as easy to do things electronically.
So I remember, like, when I worked, like, we had so much fun. It's funny, we wouldn't work in the same company, but I was like, yeah, you're one of my people. But I remember all the laughs and the stories. And how does the culture change from when you were a kid to then? Because to me, I know it was like, oh my gosh, 15 years ago now, last time we worked together. But
yeah, and I had in pipeline since early 90s. I finished up in Conklin, Rockintown, Rockin experience there, and then took off, and then I ended up in the golf business, actually. So then I got the call from Bob Carson to see if I could do some work with the Clipper project, and it was amazing about how many people I knew. And I was blown away about how much the industry had changed, how people were talking about this as a career. Like, this was a lot more, I don't want to say professional, saying that it wasn't professional before, but how, it felt like people were showing up differently, that they had a career track, starting as a laborer, wanting to be a operator and management and foreman and straws and all the rest of it. Whereas before, it was not really that. Everybody just sort of showed up, did their thing, and went on to the next one. There was no career tracks as such.
Interesting. It's nice for me to hear you say Bob Carson. Have you ever talked to Big Dave about Bob Carson?
Probably. Yeah.
Like, he has lots of kind words.
Oh.
It talks about, people, and we've all had people help us along our personal and professional journeys.
Yeah.
And if you talk to Big Dave, Bob Carson was one of those guys for him.
Yeah.
Helping him, getting going, getting his head on straight, getting the right role, doing all this kind of stuff. So a lot of time for Bob Carson. Yeah.
No. Again, a top fave guys.
Yeah.
Especially in the industry, just couldn't be any more engaging and any more just gets the job done, but in such a easygoing manner. So I had the pleasure of working with him a number of times.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
But even, like, I was working with a contract at the time, but I still go over to his office to get UPI tickets or whatever. So it doesn't even matter. And, you end up sitting down for 10 minutes. You tell you a story and have a smoke.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
No, really, really good times.
If I remember correctly, he's a dart shark as well.
Oh, is he?
I think I may have had that experience.
Darts. Oh, like darts on the wall?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
I thought you were talking about smoking darts.
Exactly.
Yeah, Bob Carson's, what does he say? Breaking hearts, smoking darts.
That is one thing that I was grateful that it hadn't changed that much. Just some of the colloquial language.
Oh, yeah.
When I think it was 17 when I went out on the line for the first time, and, I'd go back home to hang out with my friends and, say some of these things, and they're like, what?
Oh, yeah.
What language are you speaking? But it's just common. It's, it's the local language.
Oh, man, it's not even jargon. It's like literally our vernacular, how we speak.
Yeah.
I remember after that Clipper job, I went and worked at TC for a couple years afterwards, and I definitely had to polish up my language a little bit after, about the first day or two in the meeting, we would talk to people, and I'm talking out loud, and I could see people kind of twitching and tightening up a little bit. I'm like, okay, well, that's okay. There's enough. Don't say that again. I'm up to 3 things you're not supposed to say. Yeah. One thing I love talking about when I was with Ken Shearer, we were looking. Ken and Liz, love again.
Yeah.
Can you think of 2 more lovely things?
No, I cannot.
So we were looking at a job around Fox Creek area. Went by GP and then came back from Fox Creek, and I'll never forget it. I'm sitting in the pasture. It's a small plane. You sit next to him, and we're looking at the job and having a BS, and I'll never forget it. He turned over to me and he tells me, "Oh, Jim Dixon died.
Oh.
And it turns out he was texting you. That's where he got the information at the time. So I got it firsthand from him, from you. That was a tough one.
Oh, yeah. Jim Dixon was worked for my dad for I don't remember a time when he didn't work for him. Had Dixon stories aplenty.
Yeah, you can. You'd have to write them down. There's too many.
Oh, yeah, and you have to know him to really appreciate the depth and the complexity of these stories too, about how ridiculous some things happen. But Kenneth, I call him Kenneth, but Kenny and Liz, oh my gosh, same thing. He was a pilot for my dad for years. I spent a lot of time at their acreage in, oh gosh, I can't think of, I shouldn't even say, but, when their kids were little, but now their kids have their own little kids. It's crazy.
For sure.
So been around them for a minute for sure.
Yeah.
When I first met Liz, I'm like she's just so nice.
Oh my God. Like, I don't even know what to say.
Right?
I don't even know.
And, Kenny being the pipeliner, I'm like, how does that? But it just works. Know. They work it.
I have a Jim story I want to share, but before I do, I'll just sidetrack real quick. So this would be 2019. I just got up to Chetwynd. We're just starting the job.
Yeah.
And I remember I like making these little videos. I don't know, just something. Like I said, I need attention a lot. So I make videos. And it was International Women's Day or something. I thought, amazing. Sounds good. So I went to, a few client trailers, a couple women there, did a little bit. Can you shoot me few second video I could pull it together, post it. Very proud of you guys, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so Liz was on the job. Then it walked into the office. Liz, this is what I'm trying to do. If you want to do a little bit, just say something nice about International Women's Day, and I'll give you my phone. You can shoot in private, whatever. She goes, no, I'm ready. And then she turned her whole body language. I'm like, oh, okay, sounds good. So I'm scrambling, grabbing my phone. So I put, okay, go ahead. So she's looking at me like that. Oh, I just want to say I see all these girls around and I'm so proud of you and you're doing so good. And this is going on about 30 seconds and Liz is talking to me to look her right in the eye. And I'm starting to cheer up. Like, I'm just so, like, she has that effect. It just, she's so sincere and lovely and kind and all these things. Yeah. I'm just like, okay, good. Thank you, Liz. I got to go. I'll talk to you later. Bye. Like, just a wonderful human being. But again, I can't capture all my Dixon stories because there's literally so many. But one I love when Jim actually get up and talked at your dad's funeral. Like, amazing.
Yeah.
Talking about, because you could tell they don't have the same emotional bandwidth probably as yourself. And I guess maybe me, but so it's all pretty just the facts behind business, but he would still, it's very serious, tell the stories, but you're just howling. Thing. And that room, how many, there was 200 or 300 pipeliners in that room. And I just walked around so grateful to see everyone, talk to everyone. And literally you're grieving because, you're someone very important to all these people is dead and passed on.
Yes.
But we're laughing.
Yeah.
The whole time. I'm like, I can't even stand these stories, but if you're not from that community, you wouldn't understand.
And my dad wouldn't have wanted it any other way, right? Like, that's the culture that I guess he spent his life in. Mm-hmm. Like, I forget how old he was when he broke out. So there was probably 17, 18 years old. And that is it, right? Pipeliners continue to pipeline, whether they're at a funeral or standing in, Fox Creek. Like, just keep pipelining the job over and over again and telling the stories of,
for sure,
antics and situations and how they, figured it out and got it done. And just, it's a celebration of how it all comes together, truly.
No, definitely. There was, I was working with Jim at Worley briefly, and then he left to go do another job. And so I'm sitting in my little workstation. We're all in a big bullpen all together. And Jim left, and like the Monday, another old boy showed up, Brian Gilliott. Do you know Brian?
I think we met,
Brian Gilliott. So same thing. Worked with Jim forever and a day, same age, same vintage, started pipeline late 50s.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and then he started telling me stories again. I'm like, oh, okay, so this is how this works. mostly the same stories as Jim, because they all work together.
Yeah.
Some of the middles and ends had changed, but
Different perspectives.
just howling. But I'm a young guy trying to get going, and in my head, like dying laughing because I know I'm witnessing something special. But at the same token, it's like, yeah, like I got shit to do. I'm trying to go back because it's always the young kid who cranks everything out. But oh yeah, I love those old boys. Every time I hear one, it breaks my heart a little bit because there's something special about that vintage, that generation, and it's a magic I've never seen replicated because some of these names are bigger than life, and there's a lot of personalities out there now. It's just different.
It is. Yeah, it is. But I don't know that the industry would be where it is today without, the OGs guys influencing people like yourself, who are in turn influencing, the younger up and comings, and
influencing it for a positive, I hope.
For positive, absolutely. Well, as you've shared on here too, that both of your boys at this point, maybe your daughter as well, might.
Yeah, she was talking about going welding for a bit, and I think she's maybe changing gears. But our little princess is in grade 12. We got 2 kids out of the home, and they've both been out pipelining, and I am so proud of them because when I see them out there in the yard of the right of way, I look at them. And I'm like, it's everything I can do because I want to go over there and just grab them and hug them. I love you guys so much. And I'm like, well, they probably wouldn't like that, so I'm not going to do that. I'll just actually, I love you. But maybe my dad was like that when us boys were young. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or maybe, again, like I said, not the same emotional bandwidth in that generation as we have now. But yeah, I'm very proud of them.
I worked in Atchison for some time as well, but working in the field is, as you mentioned too, like different. But just one more Dixon story.
Yeah.
In Whitecourt, Alberta. I love that place, by the way. I don't know why, but I just loved being there. And, back in the day, the trailers, how they were set up, I'm in an open area. He's in an office at the other end. But he didn't have to say anything. You could just get a sense of Jim. And I'd be working away trying to get payroll done for this job or whatever. And all of a sudden, you just look up and there's Dixon, with his hat, just a still catches off. And just looking down at the office and just checking in. And he would, sort of go back. Yeah. Like, what a Looney Tune.
Oh, yeah. Well, I told you the story one time. So again, we're in the office. So it's in Calgary. We're planning a job. So Jim gets there at 6. I got there maybe a few minutes afterwards. It's pretty early. No one's around. People start strolling around 7 and 8. Our office is right next to each other. And I can hear him. Like, he doesn't know I'm there yet, but I can hear he's mad, swearing, just like I can hear him going off. I'm like, it's dark out. There's no one around. And I'm like, go in the room. I'm like, hey, Jim, is everything okay, man? What's going on? Wow, I just can't figure out half my computer screen. It's half, so I can only work in this half. But what he did is he pulled that little taskbar. He was trying to work because he'd arrived there at about 5. Now he's trying to write an email in this little section of this computer screen. I'm like, oh yeah, Jim, I got no problem. So I'm just like, fix it for him. Like, yeah, are you good? Yeah, sounds good. So I go into my office. I'm like, I feel like I need to tell someone this stuff. This is so funny. But yeah, no, just, again, for a guy like me who grew up with all these kids and just to see them from a distance and hear these names and get to meet some of these guys, it's such, I feel very lucky, I should say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
So now I got to meet Brian Serreris. So I never got a chance to meet him until a few years ago. And finally, it's like Bill Ostrich, same thing. Yeah. I had these names my whole life.
Yeah.
And then finally get a chance to meet them and want some again, Dixon and Gilly, and get to actually know them. Big Dave. Big Dave's one of those guys. He's the same. He'll sit there. He'll just tell me stories. Start laughing for an hour. I love it.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So what are you up to these days? I did want you to talk a little bit about what you're doing these days because I'm very curious and interested.
Well, as you're acutely aware, when we were on that Clipper job, I lost my husband. He died by suicide about 9 months after I started back in the biz. And then that same year, my dad died that December. So we had quite an exceptional year of loss. And that is something that I'm doing now. I'm helping people with grief.
So was it that summer that basically directed you to that, or this has always been kind of in the back of your head?
No, right? Because nobody wants to think about that they're going to grieve anybody. And because of the impact that it had, my girls were 8 and 10 at the time. I was, I just continued working for as long as the job was. And then, you're just figuring it out as you go.
Mm-hmm.
But, 2 very important men in my girls' lives and 2 very important men in my life, that there's a gap, there's an absence there. It wasn't until 2014, so about 5 years later, that as my girls began to, mature, in their teens now, I felt that I wasn't equipped enough to help them as they continued to, just try to make sense out of what their experience had been, specifically with their dad.
Mm-hmm.
And, I threw every tool in my toolkit at supporting them and helping them, but I felt without. So that would, 10 years ago. So there's more sophistication when it comes to being aware of, mental illness. There's more access to information. Some of it, maybe they, it's not filtered. So I needed to take a deeper dive into grief, because I also felt too, we were five years out. How can I support them now, as they're reflecting on when they were 8 and 10 and now they're older. So I contacted the Grief Recovery Method, is who I trained with.
Mm-hmm.
And my first and foremost question was, what is your position or about people who die by suicide? And what they had said to me in response was that there's no quantification as to, your loss. So there are a significant number of life events that can perpetuate feeling grief. Mm-hmm. And in 2009, there's still that stigma around suicide. And because we didn't know any different, right? I didn't know any different. But in 2014, I wanted to know where they stood, what did that look like for them? And they, regardless of the cause of death, grief is grief. And I'm like, all right, sign me up. So the training was phenomenal. What I also learned during that time is that, or was reminded, I'm their mom first. I'm not the grief counselor. Mm-hmm. However, it was incredibly helpful to me, mm-hmm. because I didn't realize that there were some things that I still had, that I was holding on to that, was maybe stopping me fully moving forward, especially emotionally, mm-hmm. A little bit, the remnants. And there's always going to be remnants lurking around in dark corners kind of thing. And that'll pop up.
Just time to process it hadn't.
Right. Or things that I didn't think about that were part of the loss, but I didn't consider that to be a grief experience. So I learned a significant amount. And so I wanted to be able to help other people, regardless of what their loss was, to move forward, mm-hmm. right? And because that's an amazing thing. Sometimes grief can really lock you into a state, like a state of being that maybe if you feel like, so heavy because of all the life experiences that have sort of impacted you, and it sort of limits your energy for life.
For sure. Like one thing that I did read that article, the incomplete list of grief you sent me.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate it, because to me, like, everyone grieves so differently. I won't say the names, but we did have a friend who lost his wife there. This would be some years ago now. And then he was at work a couple of days later. And I remember talking to Sweet Marie about this, going, yeah, it didn't feel right.
Yeah.
That he was back at work so quick. And, we're like, well, kids, and these are all his friends. And this is, we're in the middle of a job and this is what he knows and this is his comfort.
Yeah.
Maybe this is, he's either processed it in some respects already because it was a long-term illness.
Yeah.
Or this, it's a distraction. Either way, he's back there and it's awesome.
Yeah.
So,
we learn how to grieve, and we learn what grief looks like based on what we've seen our parents do, right?
Mhm.
And how they've talked about death or loss,
Mhm.
right? So let's just expand what people can potentially grieve from. So of course, death is the obvious not first choice because there's no hierarchy.
But it comes to mind immediately.
Right. That's the first, and divorce, like ending of a relationship that has been significant. Definitely grief attached to that. But significant changes in patterns and in relationships. So empty nesters can experience grief, right? Patterns of, and you've got one left. And I know you and I are sort of on the same page there, you're wanting your kids to go into the world, but the house feels different.
For sure.
And, or marriage, people getting married can struggle with, pre-marriage and marriage. Some of the things that you would think to celebrate, graduation, right? That's the end of a significant pattern of, going to school, whether it's high school or college or university. And now you're that comfort of the people and the parameters in which your ecosystem in which you were swimming in. But, and there's a huge list. Legal problems, financial changes, both positive and negative. So, you read about that with lottery winners. They, get the windfall, and it takes less time than one would think to sort of be back in the same financial situation, or job loss or career changes. There's a lot of things that just interrupt what we know to be our patterns, right, in relationships. Plus the intangibles like the loss of hope and expectations and goals for the future, safety or trust, or, there's so many things that one can, feel grief over. So, and of course, one event isn't standalone. There's generally other ones that, sort of not a package deal, but you can experience a number of them based on one loss in your life.
I appreciate you bringing this up because I do have a lot of conversations every day, and people reach out every day and, looking for work. Hey, you got anything going on, all this kind of stuff, lots of those calls. That's why I was hoping you'd bring this up, because I know rarely, like 99 out of 100 times, they won't ever come out and say it. It's not good, man.
Right.
It is.
Yeah.
This is shit's real.
Yeah.
All of a sudden.
Yeah.
But they won't. They whatever reason, because they don't know me that well, they're not comfortable, it's embarrassing, whatever. They don't want to come out and say, like, hey, holy shit, the end of the month's here. Like, I need some cash, man. We need to get moving. And I could see there's a lot of people hurting, but I don't know how. My assumption is when I'll have long-term projects, like, Trans Mountain and Coastal, these are like 5-year projects. So that's a long time sustained income for a lot of people. And we've brought out a lot of new pipeliners that don't know anything. So it's their only jobs. They don't have the same network, same foundation as being a pipeliner. Well, all of a sudden, there's a lot of people on the street. And I think we just think it's all about money and finance and holy shit and all this kind of stuff. I can get their job. But the reality is they did lose some identity, and they did lose that long-term income, and that the foundation, the structure, their family dynamic that they've created all of a sudden is shifts. And I bet you there's a lot of that stuff going on, and I'm not convinced other people know who to reach out to, who to talk to, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, because there's I don't want to say a ripple effect, but for people who have been in the industry, right, they have had the experience of working for 6-8 months, maybe, and then going home, and then that there's an adjustment period, which I'm sure you've experienced in your own home as well, and then got to go to work again. And sort of get back into that rhythm because you're supported with, your peers. You're in a new location, you're getting a paycheck again. And now that these big projects are done, there's not the next job on the horizon. Like, everybody is sort of a bit uncertain as to, what it looks like for them in the future. So that could be affecting their relationship. That could be affecting their finances. That could be affecting their home life. That could be affecting how they think about themselves. Like, why am I not getting hired? Like, I've reached out to this guy and this guy, like there can be, so it all starts to maybe pile up a little bit.
Oh, for sure.
And, grief is being talked about so much more, like compared to, 10 years ago, or even 15 years ago. So many more people are using their voice, sharing their experience, but it is unique to each person because, I could meet somebody who has lost their father, and I've had my experience and they've had theirs. Though the loss is the same, my relationship with my dad was what it was. My relationship their relationship with their dad was what it was. And so that's where the commonality can end. There might be some, similarities, but our emotional connection to whatever it is that's no longer around, and that can even be the job and the camaraderie and all of that kind of stuff. We feel, like something is missing. And so, not everybody in the business, maybe some go back and start a business themselves or sign on to do some other work that keeps things going. Others have not been successful in doing that or haven't sought that out. So there can be a lot of things that emotionally can start to get heavy, and can impede how they do show up for themselves and for the people that are in their lives.
For sure. No, it's a tough time for a lot of people, but it's really broad sweeping right now across Western Canada because, like I said, so many pipelines spilled onto the street, and there's not these major programs anymore. So there's a lot of people in the same boat.
Yeah.
And even all the people I talk to, I just say, you know what, just try to pause, take a step back. I know bills got to get paid, but at the very least, look after yourself. This is not a reflection on who you are as a person and all this kind of stuff. Just try to reinforce the fact that, bills still got to get paid, but maybe there's another way, even if it's just a short term. But it's a kick in the teeth for sure.
Yeah.
For a lot of people.
And I guess, I remember on my first job, the first paycheck I got, I was like struck. And this was back in the 80s. Like I was a waitress before that at a golf course.
Yeah.
So there was a bit of a disparity between what I got from working in the warehouse versus what I was getting making a milkshake for the guy on the turn. And I promptly drove to the city and spent the whole thing on a Alpine stereo for my car.
Like a real pipeliner. So that's how you knew you were a real pipeliner.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, it's, as you said, it's not about the big ticket items. It's about the day-to-day and about having purpose and about believing in yourself. And how can you take the skills that you learned on your first pipeline job and convert that into something that's not pipeline, but, adapt those skills to a different industry or a different company. So there's not, like, how do you support them to do that? It's not, you're working 6 days, sometimes 7 days. If they're in camp, maybe they're in and then they're out. Like, there's finite amount of time unless they take it upon themselves to, get support on how to diversify or how to transfer their skills or how to manage money differently so that, there's more money at the end of the month or at the end of the job.
Like I would say a lot of companies, especially the larger ones, they have a lot of different programs as part of their, their benefits package or wellness programs. And a lot of them nowadays do include financial planning.
Excellent.
Just try to structure people's lives differently. Unfortunately, I'm sure most will reach out to those people once they're already kind of in a jam or whatever. But the idea is to create a community of pipeliners that is self-sustaining. Because the ebbs and flows of this industry, even now, they're wild.
Yeah.
And even Lisa and Brian, when they had their trucking company, they said, they would be so cautious to hire oil and gas people. Because the reality is, once it picks up again, those drivers, they're gone.
Yeah.
So it's you need people, but at the same token, you spend 6 months and they go away. I don't know how to soften out those ebbs and flows in the industry. I don't know.
Yeah. I think pipeliners are special in that their commitment to go wherever the job is, to stay as long as they can, or, to be a part of something significant that supports not only them and their family, but, the world at large, really. And then they go home and they don't have that continued support, right? They don't have, you're missing that.
For sure.
And so I'm not sure how you sort of fill that gap or create a pipeline for them, to learn more about themselves and how they can utilize the resources personally and financially and relationship wise and so on.
Like, again, so that there's your joint family I work with now, and both joint venture families have different resources. They're all free, whether the job's going on or not, which is
great.
Amazing.
Yep.
But I've also noticed, I'm part of a lot of pipeline job boards on Facebook and Pipelines of Canada, Alberta, BC, all this kind of stuff. Because, there's great pictures and great stories, and LinkedIn now. And it's a wonderful community of remarkably supportive people.
Absolutely.
And a lot of these people, although they work in the same industry, they've never met. But it's pretty, it fills my cup a bit reading some of these posts, how people share and support. And hey, I heard a job up here, check out Macro by Fort St. John, and they've got, I don't know, just trying to help people. And it's really inspiring.
But some of the hardest work can be that emotional stuff, right? Again, that has changed. You have certainly made a huge impact by being more forthcoming about mental health, encouraging other people to talk about their experiences with mental health and loss. I don't know if grief is considered, there are some, long-term grief and things that would be clinical or, under the DSM when it comes to mental health, but it affects your mental health, right? How you think and how you feel and how you interact. So and nobody wants to grieve, right? Yeah. Nobody wants to raise their hand and say, hey, I'm grieving because there hasn't been work for 6 months. Like, nobody is saying that. And I'm certainly not suggesting that be the change. But the reality is sometimes when you identify how you're feeling, and then it's maybe a little less daunting, because then you can look at it from that perspective rather than keep, it in your back pocket per se.
But yeah, no, it is tough, because even a bunch of people I've talked to, what they said was, they're hesitant to share with their own crew when they're struggling.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's simply, although, it might be a bit embarrassing or whatever, but they said mostly they just don't want to let people down. They don't want to feel like they can't be relied on in a clutch. These kind of things, so they're very hesitant to speak up.
But I think the difference is that when they do, it's not that they are becoming vulnerable, because that can be one of the biggest strengths, to get the support of the people that maybe you didn't know that would support you.
For sure.
So whenever we have an opportunity to talk about mental health, it's always, there's something good that comes out of that, because maybe people feel less alone. Maybe they are able to identify their own feelings a bit more. And I think the idea that feelings, especially in a male-dominated industry, I don't think we're at that place anymore where it's not okay to, express how we feel or have feelings. And the more people that, like yourself and the others who are sharing that maybe they're having a rough patch, or that this is happening and this is what they're doing about it, that it can be maybe hope for somebody.
I hope so. Like, my objective is pretty simple. I just want to normalize the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I've been able to do that even through social media, because people, although it's maybe very nervous for me to come out and say, Sherry, I'm not in a good place, because my wife, my kids, all this kind of stuff. But can I text you? Yeah. Because texting feels a lot more comfortable.
Yeah.
Being open. And what I found is, guys that I know or worked around different companies, so we know each other, but not really.
Yeah.
You know, they will reach out on Facebook Messenger or LinkedIn or text or whatever. And I'm always thank them right away. Man,
Yeah.
I appreciate, maybe this text wasn't the easiest one to send, but I like really appreciate it.
I always acknowledge people's emotional honesty and their courage, because that is, I feel absolutely honored when somebody is willing to share what's going on. And my response is always, tell me more. Right. Because, and I've had this experience my entire life where talking to strangers is something that happens, and they share with me significant things in airports and on vacations and on different things. And each time I feel like I'm just grateful that I was present to hear that, and hope that they felt heard by sharing whatever it is that they had to share.
Might be just on the same wavelength or something about you makes people comfortable, maybe.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So what would you be doing if you weren't here today?
Just in general?
Yeah.
Well, writing, because I'm sharing some information about, or I've just started sharing some information online for mostly women who have struggled with different life events while they've been trying to build a business, and how we can maybe let go or untangle some of that, the emotions that have happened in our personal life that's maybe affected how we show up professionally or back and forth. So it's a new project that I just am getting behind. So that was part of my plan. And walking the pug.
Right on. Yes, we sent one of our pugs over the Rainbow Bridge then, but we feel very sad.
Yes. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, me too. You don't realize how the presence a little dog has in your house until it's gone, for sure.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
I am in denial, so I do not want to imagine.
Oh, we're trying to get Ivy over there so we could have a grumble.
I know.
Ship has sailed, Sherry. Yeah.
In spirit.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to save some stuff for next time, but it means a lot to me that you came and talked to me today, and we'll just kind of see where this conversation leads if you ever come back next time, okay?
I would always come and sit with you and hang out, David.
Right on.
Never a question. Always yes.
Love you, friend.
I love you.
Okay.
Ciao.